I'm a SUD specialist, but we don't have that category yet to go put on my card. So I'm working on that. I'm working on becoming a supervisor. Um, I have about 10 years of peer support, um, working with addicts and alcoholics in sober living.
Wow, a lot of experience. Thank you, Mindy. I'm glad you're here. Christopher or Mita, would you like to go?
I'm Christopher Hayden. I work for the Department of Mental Health in Koreatown at Peer Resource Center. I'm a community health worker.
Good to see you, Christopher. Thanks.
So I'm Mita Beach, they, them. I work at DAP Health. We include all of old DAP Health and all of the old Borrego stuff. So we cover most of the inland area and the north and the east part of San Diego County. My team that I work with, we are trans health navigators. So we come in and help all of our gender diverse patients navigate all of the insurance and medical stuff and provide peer support while we're doing that. And then additionally, since I had years as a peer support specialist before I came into this role, I also support our in-house peer teams and our in-house harm reduction teams. So like I provide them space for a smart recovery group once a week and stuff like that.
Wow, super cool. Thank you, Mita. I'm also glad you're here. Okay, cool. Those are our panelists. Awesome. What I'd like to do, our panel knows the conversations, the topic that we're talking about today, but if we can, I'd like to just start with the question of understanding the basics of what we're talking about today. So my question to you would be, how would you define LGBTQ plus inclusivity within workplaces, within your workplace or workplaces in general? Like, what does LGBTQ plus inclusivity look like?
Well, that's kind of the thing is that's a question that I don't think has completely been answered, especially where I work. I'm because I actually where I literally everything in our topic I've encountered. I've already been working for 5 months and I've encountered the positives and the negatives of this subject. And um I'm in a panel that we're setting up for the DMH training where we're all LGBTQ identified, and we're actually trying to figure out how to have a unified exact, because especially with people that are resistant, which for me, resistance can be kind of a gray area of where is it homophobia, where is it transphobia, and we're trying to figure out a way to make things as unified in a language, because that's the real problem that we're having, is that there's too much of resistance towards what someone says. If someone, you know, presents differently, then there's a lot of like, well, I don't understand this, and there's a lot of, I find, people even being more embracing the idea of pushing back. I mean, personally, I feel that's what we really are dealing with is saying inclusive. I feel like sometimes what we're dealing with is people that are tolerant opposed to inclusive, and that's very different. And for me, that's a very big concern, because I think the language with people that are not very comfortable, that are not very, let's say, welcoming towards this as a new experience, it becomes very easily to use the idea that language isn't clear. So therefore, I don't understand this, and therefore I don't have to deal with it. And that's, for me, that's really the questions I keep having to ask is, what exactly is our language? What exactly is our presentation? Because it feels very much to me that it's a tool, can be weaponized if we don't have something very clear, very concise, very much parameters of this is what it is, with people that are resistant to even embrace it or even try.
Thank you, Christopher. So, I mean, essentially, whatever it does look like, make sure that it's clear. And it's got to be clear and concise in order for, hopefully, for people to be receptive to it. So, yeah, that's a very good point. I appreciate you sharing. Does anyone else go ahead.
I really like what you said. We try to, with our language, we are an LGBTQ place of business, and so 99% of us are LGBTQ, and the way we talk to each other is still foreign to us because it's such. What we try to do is disperse with the individual and make it all inclusive. Like, hello, Christopher, how are you? Excuse me, could you step aside? Not excuse me, sir, would you step aside? Excuse me, could you step aside? We try and leave the pronouns out of it, because even we have the same problem on when we're talking to someone. It's there are so many pronouns to use. Unless you directly know the person, it's very difficult because if you mispronounce a zer, then unless you know that person, you're going to misgender them. And so it's best if we leave the pronouns out when we're talking to the place in general or the people in general. I feel that's very helpful in our situations because even totally LGBT office, we still screw up. Pronouns have been around for a long time. They're kind of ingrained in our DNA practically, out of respect. But now with all the differences and all the mental health problems that go along with the community, it's really difficult to abandon what's so deeply ingrained in our thoughts. And so if we try, and if we don't run around like our hair's on fire, if we're accident, if we apologize for misgendering, most of us are okay. It's an accident. But as long as we continue to try, that's what we try to teach people, is to continue to use the general sense of person or people. So.
Thank you, Mindy. Go ahead.
Jessica, could you repeat the question again?
Yeah, of course. It's really just a general question of how would you define LGBTQ plus inclusivity in the workplace?
So I'm kind of like Mindy a little bit, right? Like, the company I work for started out as Desert AIDS Project, right? Like, our headquarters is in the heart of Palm Springs. It's gay, 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 right? But part of the problem we have is educating these cis gay men and these older lesbians that there's more letters included, right? But I think to speak to reinforce what Christopher and Mindy said, it's setting policies and it's having conversations. And as leaders, we have to lead with love, right? Not lead with shame, right? We have to sit down with people and have conversations and say, and make it okay and make a safe space for our direct reports and our other coworkers to come to us and say, hey, did I do this right? Did I have this interaction the right way, right? And so I've had to go along and basically educate one by one or in small groups of, hi, my name's Mita. My pronouns are they, them. How may I address you? Boom. I know what the other person needs, right? But as far as the whole work site, the it's not just that. It's not just language, right? It's comprehensive benefits, right? It's knowing that senior leadership is looking at all of us like we matter. Go back to I work for a primarily an AIDS service organization, right? And our trans healthcare for our employees is atrocious. I'm in the middle of going back and forth with HR to try to improve it, right? Because I raised my hand and said, well, why aren't these policies inclusive? And they looked at me and said, what do you mean? Right? It goes down to dress code, right? Like dress code is written very binary. There's not a dress code that I fit in. So I look at people and they tell me I'm out of dress code, and I tell them that I'm not in the dress code at all. So it's okay. Right? So all of those things fits into whether or not our workplace is inclusive, right? And the best we can do as leaders of smaller teams or larger teams is to sit down and work with our teams on how do we make a safe and inclusive place for them. And then we take those lessons up to the people above us and try to bring it all over the entire organization. That might be way bigger picture than you were looking for.
Love it. I love bigger picture. So I'm looking for all of it. That's great. Wonderful response. Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Mita. Rebekah, do you want to pass or do you want to go to Larry? Anyone?
I just wanted to add, I really liked what everybody said. I think, kind of what I heard is it's not something that's easily defined, even if it was something that we define in our own workspace. For each person, it's going to be different and it's always changing. So I think really it's more of like an ongoing conversation, sort of an ongoing posture towards we want to be inclusive in our workplace, and listening and trying to figure out how we do that. And so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of be a part of this conversation today.
Totally. Yeah. Thank you for your comments. I'm gonna get to Larry really quick, and then I'll come back to you, Mindy. Is that cool? All right, go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Christopher, you said language. Was there language other than pronouns that was concerning, or is that primarily it?
Well, what we're in the panel that the idea is that there's going to be at DMH and actual training, there'll be LGBTQ, understanding to try to educate people. I mean, we just last week finally are we have now not just male and female, we now have non-binary, which is a really big deal for this place. I'm telling you, it's not their normal way of thinking, but that's a change that's going to have to be addressed.
Where is this? Whereabouts is this?
The Department of Mental Health.
I mean, like physically in the state. I mean,
oh, Los Angeles.
Wait a minute, this is Los Angeles?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
This literally last week just came, and I've been on every week. I do this panel that is basically where the people that are getting together. We're trying to figure out what is going to be a training that will be in August, and we're trying to figure out how to, because our concerns are, we want to try to get people to stop thinking in them and start thinking in us in a more unified way. We want to also make it to where it is to where, because I can tell you my experience in the 5 months I've been working has been in some ways unbelievably shocking at some of the things that I've observed, things that feel like I took a time machine back to 1990.
Really?
And the thing is that what I see is people that are resistant, there are different levels of resistance. There's resistance where people don't really want to understand something. They just are like, yeah, this is strange. I don't need to deal with this. Like, I'll give an example where I'm at. I've been trying to, because I'm mainly about resources is what we bring. And I'm trying in the community, for instance, to start building a relationship with the Transgender Wellness Center. And that has been a problem with the people that I'm working with. They have no real understanding of history. They have no understanding of what it looks like when you walk in with a department of mental health, you have mental health, and you're walking in. And I've had to do those teachable moments, as we call it, where I'm like, well, of course, you know, do you know your history? Do you understand? I've tried to educate people, and some of the people really are starting. It's taken a long time. Like I recently brought in for resource stuff with Ryan White, because we have people that have come up to me that I think identify me as being somebody that is at the very least an ally, asking me, can you help me about HIV medicine and stuff? But there's been this whole thing in my work environment where the people, including my superior, say, well, people aren't that comfortable. And again, I had a conversation recently where I was like, first of all, you're really not getting this. We have, for certain people that are intravenous users coming in, we know that. And those people alone are potentially going to need this. And whether we make a big presentation or not, if we have these flyers that I've set up for the program, like to go to UCLA and get on it, and then the like what you can gain from it, there's obviously people are interested, but it's like I'm dealing with an environment where sometimes it feels. I had a conversation the other day where I was trying to explain to someone that was a worker that these resources are bigger than just LGBTQ, that if you go to the senior center where I had, for me, that was my first real like social worker that helped me and stuff, they will help people whether or not how they identify that these are resources, especially people of a certain age. And this is the kind of stuff I'm dealing with. I'm dealing with a attitude that sometimes feels straight up phobic and sometimes feels just resistant to just change. And it's hard for me sometimes, unless it's very obvious, which, so you understand, I work in an environment where someone recently talked about a client that came in to another worker, and I'm going to say something offensive, they called him a faggot. And I was just like, which it was very good that I wasn't there that day, because it would have been really serious for me. But I have people like that I'm around, and I'm telling you, it's not as isolated as you would think. There is, especially with the DMH, where people probably need to retire, to be quite honest. We got people that are really inflexible and are just barely what I would call tolerant. That's why, again, I'd say with the language that we're dealing with, the idea of inclusive, what that is, because I think sometimes what we call inclusive really is just being tolerant. And we need to progress, for me, past tolerance to inclusivity.
Okay, let me get this straight. This is the DMH in Los Angeles?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
My God.
Yeah,
And-
that was how I felt.
And you say you're getting pushback from people? That's what's happening?
I have to be cautious with my speaking, because I do have to where I have reports and investigations going on with this stuff.
Okay, I
I'm not
understand.
sure, like how far I can talk about this, but let's just say that when I reported something 3 days after, the coworker I was having trouble with that I reported was transphobic, homophobic, and saying these things and treating me in this like I was a sissy and stuff. So doing kind of that
Yeah.
coded kind of crap.
Yeah.
They have like a client that's like their teacher's pet, suddenly out of nowhere, and I've been there for months, accused me of wanting to sleep with them and having sexual interest in them.
What?
Yeah. And of course, the attitude is that I can't prove it because it's not something that has been witnessed, but it's a very common sense stuff. And I'm telling you, it has been a really, really big eye opener for me at my job.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a big eye opener for me. I had no idea.
I know.
I
know it's shocking.
I used to work in a facility that was funded by the DMH, and it was fine, and
It's
yeah,
I know it's pretty wild. I know.
yeah, I was, oh, wow, okay. So, but we're just talking about plain out, just basic like pronouns here, right? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jess.
No, go ahead, Chris.
No, it's technically we are talking about that. There is, as I said, there's a community that's trying to make improvements, is trying to, like what I'm involved in. But there's a lot of resistance, and I don't know. It's just I've heard things said about the pronouns and about having to do them that again to me it's just like wow, it's like, you know, people in higher positions of me where they don't want to deal with it. They say they feel that it's aggressively being pushed on them and that they're not allowed to do things, you know, at their pace and stuff. I mean,
Wow.
and I mean, I mean, again, I'm a low-level worker, so I have only so much that I can do. And I'll tell you, it's not so easy to, for instance, try to educate your supervisor. That's not something I highly recommend
Educate
you
your
do.
supervisor on this? Oh my
Right.
God. Okay.
You know,
Oh, that,
it is what it is. You
I'm
know,
gonna,
it
I want
it
to,
is what it is. And I do think part of a lot of it is that there are people that I feel like that there is before COVID and after COVID, and I feel like that the job has changed after COVID, and some of the people that are before, they have not really evolved. They're very much, as I said, on like a time machine that's been turned, and to them everything is kind of like optional. It's not this is something that we should try to do. And it's, you know, it's very shocking to me. You know, this has been a very shocking 5 months for me.
you've
right.
worked there 5 months. Wow. I had no idea. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for
I mean, I'm still on probation, so for me even making a
Oh,
report or doing
yeah.
anything, it's
Oh,
scary as hell.
oh
You
my
know,
God.
Uh,
yeah.
thank you, Chris, and thank you, Larry. I'm gonna go ahead and get to Mindy's comment. You've had your hand up for a minute.
That's fine. Very interesting conversation needs to be held. Christopher, I think that we're all familiar with trickle down theory. I think in today's world, in our community, it's trickle up. We the people on the bottom have to show our superiors how things are actually going down here on the basement level of society. I wanted to address Jackie's Mahomes question, the neutral restroom education training. My personal it's not something that I like to go around telling everybody, but I'll go in any bathroom. You know, I think the bathroom. I don't need someone to tell me that I can't go in there. That's a women's bathroom. I really don't care. I'm gonna go in there anyway. But neutral restrooms are very difficult in this country. This is California where it's much more acceptable. But when you go into other states that don't quite have the views of California, it becomes a problem. The problem is we just need the education. We have a long way to go. I was going to do a slide presentation, and education is one of the main things that I was going to be talking about. We can get through to many more people with education than you think is possible. I've met so many people in my life since I came out as trans that never thought that they would have a trans person's back. That never thought that they would be eating dinner with a trans person. And they're okay with that now. But they got to see that just because I dress the way I dress, that's not the person I am inside. We have to get people away from porn education and into actual education, because my community, especially the trans community, it's all about sex. That's the way we're raised. That's why we're he, she's, trannies, you know, other things, because of lack of education. We need to get out there. We have an education. And she does such a good job. She's like 3 months behind. And if you want training, you have to, it's out there. And we're trying to train schools, businesses, and everything else. So yes, Thank you for your question. What was your name? Jackie? Jackie Mahone? Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Mindy, because I got a lot of direct messages since that chat anyway, so I totally missed it. I also wanted to read Mita's comment, which I thought was really great. They said, establish a zero tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior and ensure that all staff understand the repercussions of such actions. When instances of homophobia or transphobia occur, they should be met with immediate intervention and appropriate disciplinary actions, which, you know, obviously isn't just like an easy thing to do, but I thought like for sure, like zero tolerance is usually like, you know, it's usually where things like this begin, and in order to make a change, unfortunately. So, you know, Mindy, you're talking about education, right? And so I want to ask my next question, which really just highlights that, highlights what you're talking about a bit. So, I mean, some of us touched on it already. So, how do you approach educating staff members who may lack knowledge or understanding of LGBTQ plus communities, especially though if they're resistant or unaware of their own biases?
So I'm going to go back to what I said originally is we got to, lead folks with love, right? We got to be leading with love in everything we do. And I think it's one of the things that I had to work really hard with when I first came into recovery myself, right? Was how to not just hate the world and scream at people. So with staff members that are resistant and like Christopher was saying, like, oh, well, I'm old, I just don't get it. And I'm like, I'm old, I get it. My dad's old, he got it until he died. I tell people, I'm like, hey, I changed my name 28 years ago. Like, let's get over it. Let's keep moving on. But what I do to lead with love is like I said, is I'll pull people aside and I'll set them down and I'll be like, look, you did this thing. We don't do this thing here. This is how we do it. We have a zero tolerance policy. If you do it again, I'm going to write you up. If you are afraid you're going to mess up, come and talk to me first. I'm the person that you're allowed to make mistakes with. If you're going to be interacting with our clients or with other team members, if you think you're going to mess up, go practice in the mirror or come to me and practice with me, or come and ask me questions and mess up with me, and I'll be your trainer. And that's the best way. And I literally interact with probably about 200 of our employees through the course of like a week or so. And they all know. And like, I've had random ones stop me in the hall and go, hey, did I do this right? I had this one. I just had to step out just now. That's why I put my little avatar up, because I had a nurse that was calling people on a recall list to come have their cervical screening. And they saw that this person popped up and it was a trans man. And they said, should I call him? What do I say when I call him? Right? And so we have to make ourselves available if we want to be seen as leaders, right? As, queer leaders in our organization. We have to make ourselves available for people to come ask questions if we're going to set in these policies where we're going to write somebody up if they're, because every moment of that they're causing harm, right? And I agree with Mindy. I'll go in any bathroom I want, right? But some of these younger kids, it's harmful to, right? Like they want to go to this, and I'm like, cool. Right? Like, I want to make sure that everybody knows that this is a safe place. I grew up in the deep South. I will do whatever I want because I had to when I was a kid.
I also grew up in the South, so I 100% understand Mita. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I just feel like very direct, and in my opinion, appropriate way to educate people, right? It works. I mean, it's not easy, and it doesn't, get every single person, especially if they don't speak up. But I love that you make it known as a supervisor, I'm the person you can mess up in front of, it's no big deal. Let's practice. I really, I love that so much. That's great.
Well, and the thing that I learned doing that is the one person that I've done the one-on-one with and practiced with, right? They're sitting in a little pod with a couple other people, or they're working on a project with a couple other people, and then they start teaching that, they're like, oh, guess what I learned? Let me do this. And that's how it goes organically through. Because if we just call in a class and we sit with 15 people and we go through some slides, they're going to pull out their phones and they're going to zone out and they're not going to retain that information. Right. So if we do it more in 2 or 3 people and we go, hey, look, mess up with me. Let's do this as a conversation. Then there's employee retention. And as soon as we can get them to remember and actually treat us all like humans, then we're making an inclusive workspace.
Yeah, you're so right too. They're totally going to remember that interaction as opposed to sitting in a training of 40 people. And yeah, thank you, Mita. Larry, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to ask Mita, could you explain how this zero tolerance policy works? Apparently, if you get a pronoun wrong once, what happens? You get told once, and then if it's the second time, you get written up. Is that how it works?
Well, it's whatever you write it to be.
Pardon me?
It's however you write it. It's whatever works for your organization.
Okay. I mean, I'm just this is I'm used to working in pretty trans-friendly workspaces, and this is all very new to me. Goodness, a zero.
No.
Wow. Okay.
Zero tolerance doesn't always mean you screw up and you're written up or laid off. Zero tolerance might mean you do this, we're going to have a conversation, right? And the way you write it, it might be, are you misgendering somebody maliciously? Right?
Wow.
I have people that he me every day, and it actually works out great because I just go, oh, well, my hearing aids weren't working, so I just kept talking. But they catch themselves, they correct themselves, and they move on. That's not it. So if you write in your policy maliciously or with the intent to cause harm, there's a difference because you can hear the tone, the difference, right? But it's each organization has to write these policies based on the corporate culture, and not the corporate culture that they have, but the culture that they want to have, right? So you can make it very authoritarian, right? You screw up once and you're out, or it could be, well, you screw up and you need to come sit down and let's have a conversation, right? Or if I know you're doing it intentionally, then we're going to talk about, putting in place some kind of performance improvement plan or some kind of disciplinary action because I know you're doing it intentionally. Or it could just be, hey, every time you do this, we're gonna have a meeting once a week and we're gonna practice because you're not getting it, right? It's however you write your policy, right? And before I came into healthcare, I was in the corporate world and doing consultancy and brand communication. And it's all about what fits the culture that you want to build, right? So if you want to build this inclusive culture, then it might be the zero tolerance is, oh, well, you have to go to counseling. And the counseling might be, you got to go sit in Mita's office for 5 minutes once a week and practice. Because Mita said it's okay to practice. right? So it's not, people hear zero tolerance and they're like, oh, I misgendered you, you're fired, right? It's not that. It's the zero tolerance means you do something about it every time it happens, right?
Oh, respond to it.
Right? You do something about it. You don't just let it go by,
Yeah.
right? That's the important piece, is that you get the culture of it not being allowed, right? Like
Oh,
Christopher said, like most of us that work in LGBT spaces, right? Like organizations that have LGBT in the title or something, if you walked in and called somebody, the F slur, everyone in the room would stop and turn their head and say something, right? But if I walked in and called Mindy a him, right? They would just keep walking by.
Yeah.
Right. So we've got to build that culture where if I did that, everybody would stop and go, well, you need to apologize to her, or, something, right? And the only way we can build that is if every time something happens, we do something. And that's the point of a zero tolerance policy, right?
okay. So zero tolerance means that whenever it happens, you respond in some way.
Yeah.
Right?
It
Okay.
means you're not tolerating it.
I-
Right?
Okay, you're not tolerant. Okay, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, and this would be different depending on the culture of the organization, I guess, and blah blah blah. It would be
Yeah,
different.
because like the government agencies like have all of their own like weird stuff that they have to do because of bureaucracy, right? And a lot of us in like the weird like public nonprofit kind of areas, like we can push for and advocate for the change that we want to have, right? So if we draw this utopia of the inclusive workspace that we want and pitch it up the chain, and we get approval for it, well, then we write a policy, like I said, that says, hey, every time you mess up, you got to go sit in Mita's office for 10 minutes every week and practice, right? And that literally has the thing that has worked the best for me is like, hey, let's go stand by the coffee pot and you can just practice pronouns on me for 5 minutes every day. And
Wow.
like I block time out because I work at our different clinics, and I block time out like about 15-20 minutes throughout the day when I take my breaks away from my computer, and I just go check in with people and I'm like, hey, do you need to practice?
Wow. Okay. Okay. Wow.
Awesome. Thank you, Mita. Christopher, go ahead.
Yeah, I like what you're saying. It feels to me like that, again, the inclusivity and the language, we need people that are in authoritative positions that actually are going to be on the same page that you are. And that, for me, I don't feel at all. I'm hoping with the stuff I'm working with this, trying to get this training that we're going to do, that we're going to do that. But right now, I can tell you that what I get is, instead of, yeah, this is wrong, this is going on, I get debates about, is this wrong? I've had, like with my situation, where it's been things like, well, I think you just got off on the wrong foot. And I'm like, are you kidding me? We're at this. This person is saying these things, is treating me this certain way, and we're now going to discuss it as like it's, or like it's both of us. And I'm like, it isn't both of us. I'm not doing anything except being victimized in this position. And, and I've had they're not going to change. Those kind of things have been said, which I can tell you really will irk you when you're in my situation. And that's what I keep coming to is, if we don't have the people that are the supervisors, that are the directors, if they don't have some kind of common rule of what is proper and not proper, then it becomes kind of a free for all. And that's what I feel is going on, is that there isn't a conversation of like, I mean, there is like, I'm going to write you up, but it's a joke. Honestly, it's a joke when someone gets investigated. When I had one of the more than one interviews, there was like, well, yeah, this is corporate bullying, but I don't see anything about this that actually is homophobic. Or when I was talking about the retaliation with the situation with the person, there was a client coming at me and, doing both the, you're trying to sleep with me looks and stuff. And then also where I'm a sin against God and all this stuff. You're just really like, are you kidding me? And I found myself in a position where they were like, well, this isn't provable. First of all, there's no way to know. And actually, we're not here to talk about that. And I was like, well, then we don't have, we're not going to have a retaliation conversation where homophobia is in the conversation. Why am I here? And that's the thing, is that I feel like there's a lot of kind of room, a buffer to kind of not do the right thing, to say, and I want to make something clear. Some of the situation I'm in is with people that are heavily involved with being in an organization dealing with systemic racism, white supremacy. They're very much in the idea of that there are issues of prejudice in the workplace, that there are issues that are needing to be addressed. And they say in those conversations, and of course, we're going to also deal with LGBTQ issues because that's very important, but it really isn't important. It really is, when you get down to it, it isn't. It's really about that's the limit of where things are at. And I can tell you that I guarantee if you spoke to people that I have had to deal with that are superiors, they would probably debate what's going on. They would say, well, yeah, this is corporate bullying. I can see that this is, not right, what's going on, but I don't see anything that's homophobic, transphobic. And that to me is where I like the idea of like where there is zero tolerance, but you have to have somebody that really is going to enforce that and is really going to even be able to, I hate to say it, but is going to just even be able to recognize it. Because I'm starting to really feel like that's what I'm dealing with, is people are finding ways to look around it, to say that's not really the case. That's not really, it's funny too, because I've never encountered this. And so when this started happening to me, I was being gaslit when I came with this, with my superiors, with people. It was finally when I started seeking help from the LGBTQ community of where I worked that I had people validate, because I actually felt that I was somehow maybe making something happen because that was what was going on. And again, that's the authoritative position that I'm dealing with. And I don't think this is isolated. I think this is a bigger problem. I truly believe.
Wow. Wow, I had no idea. Wow. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you,
I
Chris.
I think that what you're doing is you are starting the change by bringing the conversation up. Once you bring it up, then it opens it up for conversation with other people, and it does become important. And someone has to speak up. And I'm glad that it's you and your company.
Awesome. Thank you, Mindy. I agree 100% with that. I want to read Shelley's comment really quick. She said, ours falls under our harassment policy when needed. We do a lot of training, coaching, and include DEI conversations in our individual consultations and in our organization as a whole. Misgendering is harmful and does reach the point of harassment in the workplace if not corrected. Mita also said, the question we need to ask is, how can we work together to support change? And that advocating from the ground up is really hard. Finding allies in other departments, I have found help a lot. Do you want to add to that, Mita? I don't know if you wanted to.
Well, I was just thinking about Christopher's situation, right? And I've been in that place before, especially when I lived in Atlanta. I found myself in that place a lot. And it was literally going and finding one person over here and one person over here. And it was like I'd find one person that was a step higher than me on the rung and somebody that was a step higher than me on the rung. And together we were all writing memos and letters and emails to people above us, pushing and saying, hey, can we bring this education? Hey, I'll go to the LGBT center and find somebody that will come in and do some classes. I will find somebody that can come in and help us. And it sucks that we have to do all that labor to make a safe space for ourselves.
Mhm.
It should not be that way, especially in Los Angeles, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's so
But you know, it's the way it is. And so I think that's the thing. And I think literally when people are like, oh, when people are like, oh, well, this is an inclusive place, I'm like, no, it's not. You want to make change? How can we work together to make change? Right? But every time, and it's not being afraid. I've never been afraid to like just say things. So it's a benefit for me. But like I'll be in one of those meetings and like senior leadership is like, oh, and we're an inclusive place and this and that. And I'm like, no, we're not. Can you explain to me how we are? Right. And they stop and I have literally had the CEO of a company go, could we just schedule time and you tell me how you feel this way? And I went into his office with 4 pages of things, right? Like, hey, it's this, 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 and this, right? But it was this, this, and this, and this that I had gotten from like 5 people in 5 other departments. And I went in and was the mouthpiece for all of us, right? And it was, but I said, hey, this isn't just me. I've polled my peers, right? So it's like finding people in other departments to kind of help you work your way in, because at that point you can find a sympathetic ear in another department.
right.
And you can find somebody that's higher up on the rung. And sometimes it's somebody higher than your boss.
Yeah.
And that's when you've hit gold.
Right. Yeah. Just got to keep fishing for it. Wow. I love your directness. It's great. Okay. So, we're running a little short on time. So we talked actually quite a bit about addressing homophobia and transphobia. And so I want to ask a question geared toward avoiding outing staff and supporting people's identities. Well, I guess can any of you share personal insights or maybe even lessons learned in creating spaces where LGBTQ plus individuals have felt seen or feel seen and valued, and they feel safe from the risk of involuntary disclosure?
Hi, I'm an alcoholic, okay? And so this is very much along the lines of me being an alcoholic, as is with trans people. I won't even out a trans person in my office. Even though we're LGBTQ, they may not feel secure having everyone know they're trans. When they're ready to tell people they're trans, they will let people know. If they never tell anybody, that's okay. But you don't, in my opinion, it's very difficult to take back what you say. And so for me, I guess I'm a special person, because, or maybe there are more people. I really don't care, because I have a thought of my own that's it's not mine, that everybody has their own mindset, and you get to say whatever you want to, because it's your space. And in my space, I don't have to take your language. But going back to outing people, I try to tell people not to mention things like that. It's like when I work with alcoholics. When I'm in the grocery store, I don't even know you. It's when you're trans. If you want people to know who you are, you'll tell them. It's not my job to tell people that. And that should make you more comfortable. It's not nice to be sitting around the coffee table talking about, hey, did you know that Mita's trans? That's not the type of conversation we should be talking about.
Right. Thank you, Mindy.
That was kind of all over the place. Sorry.
No, totally. I mean, I love to hear what anybody has to offer, even in the slightest. Another question that maybe will kind of help. That I feel like that other question was a little long-winded. So I'm also curious of what you all think, like what kind of protocols or policies should be in place to avoid inadvertently outing staff members. Like, yeah, what kind of protocols can be put in place to support people in protecting their privacy, their identity? Yeah, in a way that fosters a safe environment and allows people to maybe share with some people because they're comfortable and because they're ready, and then they're not. So how do you balance that? With other people, it's not safe for them.
It's respect, for one thing. We have to teach respect towards. I don't know how you would implement a program, because people, I don't know. It's kind of like oh my, I'm drawing blank. I had the thought in my head, but people are individuals, and we can teach them about that. When you see someone that looks like trans, there was that one girl, the basketball player, who was not trans, and they said she was trans and everything like that. We just need to be more conscious of people and accepting how they are. I don't know what kind of program you could implement that would involve that, but it's just more of thoughtfulness, teaching people to be thoughtful about their actions. Again, it goes back to education on trans people and feelings. Again, sorry.
Don't be sorry, Mindy. You're awesome. Any other thoughts on that?
I think of it like with just dealing with clients, where you see them at where they're at. You don't project what you think they should be at. You don't think, and with workers or anyone, for me, I just make sure that I'm okay with who I am and how I present myself. And if people are going to respond, and they feel comfortable, that's great. If they don't, I'm not going to force in any way that is part of the conversation. I let people come to me, because I think it's like he was using, sorry, they were using the situation of the Alcoholics Anonymous, I guess it was, where to me, it's the same thing. I mean, I've had people come to me that are workers and stuff, even when I was a volunteer, and they shared things. I did not share those with other people. I did not have a conversation about that. For instance, someone was talking about their wife and them having twins, and are just even like I did groups where we would have subject matter that might be about some kind of intimacy, and it would be, even with the person that was a worker, they would speak of it in a very generalized way, and I would never like say, well, was that was that your first girlfriend? Or I just wouldn't do that, because to me it's not my place. But again, it's seeing whether it's a worker or it's a person coming in, seeing them where they're at, and if they reach out to me and they want to have that kind of conversation, I will certainly be responsive. I'm not, but I also understand that for me, it's been a process. My coming out didn't just happen overnight. And it did come for me when I started having to where I felt I was in a safe environment where that could be a conversation. And even with that being the case, it wasn't as simple. Just even the idea of like having a therapist that I could deal with my identity and these things wasn't as easy as it sounds. It wasn't just like I could have that. I had actually where I had therapists that were like, I won't deal with this. This isn't, look at the back of your medical card and find somebody on, call the number. So again, I take it very seriously. It is a bravery when people, put themselves out there. So yeah, I'm just not in any way or form comfortable with any kind of outing of what a person's doing. I mean, truthfully, I see that in general. If somebody comes to me and tells me something very private, unless it's something where they're like harming somebody, or, where are they planning on harming somebody? My attitude is like, that is not my place. And I do kind of see it that way. I incorporate the same ideas I would have with that. I do like the idea of AA and that anonymity, where it's like, yep, in the supermarket, don't know who you are,
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
So I think the piece on policy, right, around this is I think publish, whether you have some kind of SharePoint or whatever, but like publish a common vocabulary, right? Like, hey, here's some LGBT inclusive language. Let's all like practice it. Apparently that's practice is my word for today. But like also like challenge the HR team to develop some processes on what happens when somebody transitions at work, right? Like, go, hey, what happens? How do we do this? Right. And, I'm all about, I stopped years ago, like being a crazy advocate out in the world, and I just advocate wherever I'm at. So I do a lot of this at work where I'll go and ask questions. My current thing that I'm working on is Medi-Cal doesn't see gender affirming care as a specialty. So if you want gender affirming hormones, you have to be assigned to that provider as your PCP, even if they live miles away from you. But if you're on Medi-Cal, you have to live within a certain distance to your PCP. And so nobody has ever raised their question and said, hey, why isn't this a specialty? And so now that's my new advocacy thing. But like the outing people, Mindy, I use that example almost once a week. I go, hey, look, y'all all know I'm a drug addict because I walk in and I talk about being in recovery all the time. But I don't tell you who I saw at the meeting last night. It could be somebody here, right?
I preach AA to so many people without them knowing about it. It's unbelievable.
Mm-hmm. But also, it might not just be outing a trans person. It could be like I worked at this one place where I saw this one guy at the gay bar every weekend. And then every Monday, I would see him talking about his wife and his kids and da 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 da. And I so often wanted to be like, oh, here's your lighter. You left it at the Eagle. But I didn't. I was nice. And, when the entire office was surprised that his wife left him because she caught him cheating with him with a man, I was not surprised. But even then, I didn't go, well, I knew, right? That is so hard to make a policy about, right? I think the policy is to try to make not getting into people's business at work a thing. Like, stop being gossipy bitches.
There's always gonna be the water cooler.
Oh man, that was good. That was good. Okay. Okay, so Jennifer W. Jennifer White, hey, said, I really appreciate the transparency, honesty, and compassion in your heartfelt and passionate shares. I love the common theme of communicating with love and focusing on a solution. So thank you. Wow, well said, Jennifer. Love it. And then I also got a direct message from Kevin. And the question was, how can we also build a little more tolerance for people who are really trying to get it? Do not be sorry, Mita. You're adding really great stuff. So, any thoughts on that last question? I think that's the last question that we can take, and then any other thoughts or closing remarks that I would like to address.
Can you repeat that again?
For sure, yeah. It was, how can we also build a little more tolerance for people who are really trying to get it?
I encourage them. If they are coming to me and they are trying to understand, even when they're asking things that, I mean, truthfully for me, even with the circumstances that personally would be offensive to me, if I see someone trying to understand something, trying to reach that type of conversation, I try to be encouraging, and I try to also separate myself from that yes, this may be the person I am and how I am, how I live, how the people that I care about live. This might be offensive, but this person is trying to understand something. They're asking questions, and they, are trying to reach something. I try to encourage that. I don't try to discourage it in the way that with my workers, when I have recently gotten a few of them to be like, I think I'd like to try to help you go to somewhere where I really am uncomfortable, that technically I'm supposed to be in charge of. I don't sit there and go, well, why would you do it? Because you don't know what you're doing. I'll be like, yeah, that's great. I'd really appreciate your help, and discuss strategies of how to make it better. But also really emphasize that I'm really appreciative that they are thinking that way, that they are taking that attitude. And I have had that where I've had people come up to me that I work with, and they'll just be like, I just don't get any of this pronouns, and I don't want to be that person. I'm not going to make them feel foolish. I'm going to do the opposite. Say, I understand a lot of people have trouble with this, and, if you'd like to meet, I can help you with it.
Thank you, Christopher. Go ahead, Mita.
I think that's the thing right there, Christopher. It's we build the compassion in, right, by leading with love, right? Just like that, right? And it's we make it known that we can't make a safe space for any LGBTQ group unless we make a safe space for people who aren't, to learn and to ask questions. But the little trans girl that works at the front desk that just came out isn't the person that you want to practice with, right? So you have to make it known that they can come and practice with you. So that's how we make a safe, compassionate place for people to learn, is we make it known that, as supervisors, they can come to us. And even if you're not the person for them to practice with, that they can come to you and you will help them find the tools and resources, right? Back to this whole conference is about supervisors, right? And so it's making it known to your team that you will help them find the resource if you are not the resource. That's how we lead with compassion, right? And it's that's the one thing I found from my own recovery, right? Is to always assume that people's intentions are the best, even when they sound like a jerk. I always assume that their intentions are the best. So going forward, I stop and go, yeah, I've looked at people before and I was like, are you really trying to be an a-hole? Or do you just not get this? And when you're that blunt with people, you catch them off guard and they go, oh no, I just don't get it. And you're like, cool. Well, let's go figure out what you need to know to get it. And that's how we do it. And that's how we change cultures, right? It goes back to the thing I put in the chat. Like, how do we work together to create the change and not all the LGBT folks banging our heads against the wall, screaming, why don't y'all understand me? Instead of, hey, how can we all work on this together? Right? Because I don't understand straight people. So
Thank you, Mita.
I don't understand straight people either some days. But I tell you, we have to, without bringing the conversation up, we're not going to do it. If we're just sit back here and just be quiet about it, then nothing's going to happen. What we have to do is we have to talk to people. We have to talk to our peers. We have to talk to our colleagues and figure out what's going on. How can we fix it? I hate this word, what's working, what's not. So that phrase bothers me because I don't want to hear. I just want people to do. I don't want to sit around and talk about it. I want you guys to come up to me and well, I do want you to talk about it, but I want you to follow through. And if you don't know something, ask. Don't just blurt it out. Don't just say, hey, sorry, again, got derailed. We really have to start educating other people on the feelings of LGBT, and we have to be tolerant of them. We need to teach them how to be tolerant of us because we're a new community growing up. We've been around forever, and we're just now making our voices known. So people don't know who we are, and we have to tell them, we have to educate them. Who are we? How we act, how we react, and we're really not any different than you are. So,
Thank you, Mindy. Okay. Any final thoughts from my panel? Larry?
Yeah, I just wanted to throw out, to my way of thinking, the different, I mean, on the one hand, we don't want to be authoritarian, and on the other hand, we don't want to like just let people run wild. And to me, where the line is drawn, it has to do with the culture of the organization and who's doing it. If it's senior management who's doing it, okay, drop anchor. Okay, this has stopped. This is stopping right now. If it is someone who genuinely doesn't get it, that's one thing. Also, is it an occasional thing or is it a repeated pattern? Okay, if it's a repeated pattern, that's trouble. That needs to be immediately addressed. If it's only an occasional thing, that's a whole nother matter. And it has a lot to do, as Christopher mentioned earlier, about the culture of the organization. What is the culture of the organization? Anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out.
Thank you, Larry. Okay, so that is all the time we have and all the questions that we have. I so appreciate you all. If you can, this was great. Thank you. Oh my gosh, you were awesome, Mita. Thank you so much. If y'all can, please click on the link in the chat and it will allow you to do an evaluation on today's presentation. Let's see. The next session in this room is going to be supervision practices for strengthening recovery in the peer workforce. as a practice and an identity. If that sounds interesting to you, you're welcome to just hang out until 3:30. That's when it'll start. If not, and you want to explore some of the other presentations we have at that hour, you can click on the other link that I just posted, and that'll take you straight to our schedule. Mita also put their email address in the chat. So if anyone else also wants to, I think that's a great way to network and connect. Mindy, do you want to add something?
Yes, I wanted to thank everybody. I learned a lot from what everybody was saying today. And thank you. And thank you for your questions, Larry. It was really a great, it exceeded my expectations.
Yeah, this was really eye-opening to me because like yeah, right.
Yeah, I feel you. Same. Yeah, I'm the moderator too, and that I keep learning so much today. So this was really great. I appreciate you all coming on and being vulnerable and just, sharing your ideas and your insights, and yeah, I really value what you all said. So and of course what you always say, Larry, and all the questions you ask. I always love them. Wait, where did Larry go? Oh, there you are. Okay.